Hello folks, welcome once again to another video here, and this is going to be something a bit different, something I've never done before. This is going to be a preview of the 2019-2020 NHL season, which starts tomorrow, so that is going to be very exciting here. Now before I get into this though, I just want to mention, and I did say this on the community page, I think yesterday, but there is not going to be an NHL Be a Pro 20 Be a Pro video today. I do have that video ready to go, but I would rather save that for tomorrow, since that, of course, is when the NHL season opens, and plus the regular season opener with our player character in Be a Pro mode is in that video. So I would rather save that for tomorrow, so this video is going to kind of replace it. Plus, it's also kind of a bake-up for an episode that didn't get to air on the channel due to technical issues, which I won't get into that. But anyway, let's get into this, and let's start things off by going to NHL.com. And yes, last season, last season was quite something, wasn't it? Tampa Bay, of course, essentially ran away with the league last year, winning 62 games. 62! And then they proceed to get swept by Columbus in the first round. Now, obviously teams can go on losing streaks at any point. It happens. It happens to every team. Don't get me wrong. But to lose 4 in a row in the first round of the playoffs, when I'm pretty sure at that point Tampa Bay had probably lost more than twice in a row all season or something like that. Yeah, that is bad timing. But you know what? That was last year. This year, it's a brand new hockey game, if you want to put it that way. So, according to NHL.com, a lot of the experts have predicted Tampa Bay to win the Stanley Cup this year. I'm kind of neutral about that. I mean, they are talented on paper, yes, but talent can only get you so far. I mean, just look what happened to them last year when Columbus swept them in the first round. See, talent can only get you so far. Will they still be a playoff team this year? Yes. Will they win 60 games again? No. It would be interesting to see them win 60 games again, but I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, how do you recover from being swept in the first round of the playoffs after winning 62 games last season? I don't know. If we want to be honest, I think Tampa Bay's win total goes down this year. Maybe low 50 to mid 50 range, but still good enough to make the playoffs. Now, as for the Toronto Maple Leafs, they've got a whole bunch of new players on their opening day roster this year. In fact, at least half the players that were on their opening day roster last year aren't on the team anymore. Like Connor Brown, Ottawa. Nikita Zaitsev, off to Ottawa. Zach Hyman, Travis Dermott, they're on injured reserve, but they will obviously be joining the team once they are fully healthy. Patrick Marleau, free agent, and no one has signed him yet at this point. So, yeah. Now, with Marleau's situation, I'm thinking if, say, maybe the first couple months go by and nobody signs him, then I think maybe he retires. Because, remember, he is in his 40s now. And while he's still a decent player, he's not really the offensive weapon that he was earlier in his career when he was with Joe Thornton. Because I think I remember when he was playing with Joe Thornton, I think it may have been when they were in Boston, and those two were lighting it up like crazy. Now, goaltenders. Of course, we've got Freddie Anderson as our starter, and Michael Hutchinson is the backup this year. I kind of thought Michael Neuwirth would have gotten it, but I think what cost Neuwirth was the fact that the guy just can't stay healthy. Case in point, he was supposed to start a preseason game against Montreal last week in Montreal, and he wasn't able to make that trip because of an injury. So, yeah, lately the dude just can't catch a break. So that is rather unfortunate, but it happens. He'll probably find another team somewhere. I mean, he's still relatively young. Like, I think he's like at least mid-20s or something in terms of age. I could be wrong, but I think he'll find another job somewhere. So I think he should be fine. Now, as for the Ottawa Senators, they are still hot garbage. I mean, they did lock up Thomas Chabot to an 8-year contract extension during training camp, which was a very good move. But I still don't think, and while the Senators, while I think they'll get better, this year I don't think they're quite where they need to be quite yet in order to compete. So, yeah. Now, as for the Vegas Golden Knights, this, of course, is their third year in the league. Their opener tomorrow gets San Jose. Whoa, Nelly, is that going to be interesting? These two teams just played against each other on Sunday to wrap up the preseason, and there was an Evander Kane incident that happened. Abuse of officials is, I think, what they called it. So he is not going to be playing for the Sharks for the first 10 games of their regular season. I mean, the dude's a talented player, don't get me wrong. The main problem for him is his attitude. This is exactly why both Winnipeg and Buffalo got rid of him. And speaking of Winnipeg, I'm actually going to talk about them next. Now, going into the regular season, I figured Winnipeg was going to have a rough time at it this year, considering that they didn't have Patrick Laine and Kyle Connor signed at that time. They're both under contract now, which makes their situation a little easier, but it might still be a bit difficult at the same time because Dustin Byfuglien is still away from the team. We don't know when he's going to return to the Jets, if he's ever going to come back to them. From what I heard, I think he was contemplating retirement or something. And if he retires, that would be a huge blow to the Jets' blue line because Byfuglien is pretty much their anchor. And in fact, when I was actually doing my fantasy draft not long ago for hockey, I specifically messaged the chat on the ESPN website that the guys on a leave of absence don't take him, and some dude ended up drafting him in the 9th round. Well, that's his problem, not mine. The next team that I'm going to talk about is the New Jersey Devils. And they've got some pretty exciting prospects coming up. Like, Jack Hughes is entering his first ever NHL season. And, of course, they've got Nico Hershiser, who's entering his second year. And then Gusev, I think. is on there too. So they've got some young, talented players coming up. And, of course, PK Subban anchoring the blue line. So, up front, they're not looking that bad. They're looking pretty decent. Of course, they've still got Travis Zajac. And, of course, they've got Kyle Palmieri. And not to mention, they also still have Taylor Hall. So, up front, they're looking pretty decent. That alone should help them compete for a playoff spot. The one thing that I think is going to hold New Jersey back this year and prevent them from making the playoffs is the goaltending. Because their starter, as of right now, is Corey Schneider. Not necessarily a bad choice, but he's coming up to his mid-30s. And he's an older, he's not really the same goaltender that he was earlier in his career. And their backup goaltender, I believe, is Mackenzie Blackwood, and he does not have a whole lot of NHL experience yet. So, while the Devils do have the potential to compete for a playoff spot, and while I think they're going to hang in the playoff race right to the end, I think they ultimately just miss out because of their goaltending. So, the only way I could see New Jersey possibly making the playoffs is if they upgrade their goaltending, whether it's by trading Corey Schneider. Schneider would probably be the most likely candidate for trade, because I honestly do not see them trading Mackenzie Blackwood, because he has the potential to become a very good starter in the NHL. But we shall see what happens. And I think that's really all the teams that I want to talk about, because I don't really want this video to go on too long. What we're going to do now is we're going to predict what I think will be the order of finish in the NHL standings this season. Now, of course, I've been known to be wrong with predictions before, but hopefully so we will see what happens. First, let's pull up last year's standings. And of course, last year here in Toronto, we had a 100-point season, and we had to face Boston in the first round. And Montreal, as you see here from last year's standings, they had a winning record, but missed the playoffs by 2 points because of Columbus. In an ordinary world, mid-40s in the win column should be enough to get you into the playoffs, but on the rare occasion when it's not, it usually means you've got some pretty stiff competition. So, this was last year's standings in the East, and here's last year's standings in the West. Now, here's how I think the standings are going to finish. And, well, in the Metro, really anything could happen. But here's what I think is going to happen for the Metro. Pittsburgh winning the division, Washington in second, New York Islanders in third for the divisional spots. In the Atlantic, divisional spots, Tampa Bay, Toronto, Boston. The wild cards, I think, are going to be, let's see, Buffalo, I think, will be one wild card. They have not really been able to do much of anything since drafting Jack Eichel. They could use a break. So Buffalo for one wild card, and I'm going to guess Philadelphia for the other one. Either Philadelphia or Montreal. Because remember, Montreal was only 2 points out of a playoff spot last year, so they could very well get in this time around. So, yeah. That's for the East. For the Western Conference, in the Central, playoff spots, the divisional spots, I think are going to be St. Louis, Winnipeg, and who else is in there? Who else is in that Central? Let me take a look here. You'll have to bear with me here, because sometimes I tend to forget things here. Okay, there we go. Nashville, for the, I think is going to be the third divisional spot for the Central. Pacific spots, I think, are going to be the Sharks, the Knights, and the Flames. Wild cards, I think, are going to be the Blackhawks and the Colorado Avalanche. Now again, these are just predictions. I could end up being right, I could end up being wrong, but we will have to see what happens once the games do end up starting. The one thing, though, that I do hope for in this NHL season is that we avoid facing Boston in the first round. And in order to do that, we'd pretty much have to win the division, which could be tough because while Toronto's a good team, Tampa Bay, I think, is an even better team. So again, we'll have to see what happens. So I think that is going to wrap it up for this NHL season preview. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you again soon.